What happens when a movie breaks all the rules after it's already packed the theaters and made everyone blush? In Hollywood's pre-code era, films weren't just pushing boundaries, they were lighting them on fire. But the party didn't last. The censors came marching in, scissors in hand, ready to chop, ban, and rewrite the wildest stories ever put on screen. Do you think you know what got cut and why? Stick around because some of these censorship tales are messier than the movies themselves. Redheaded Woman 1932. Let's kick things off with the flaming hot scandal that is Redheaded Woman, starring Jean Harlow at her most unapologetic. Imagine a film so brazen in its moral mischief that even the censors didn't know where to start cutting. Harlow plays Lil, a secretary with ambition and absolutely no scruples, on a mission to seduce, blackmail, and claw her way up the social ladder. She's not just breaking hearts, she's practically bulldozing the American dream, one rich husband at a time. The trouble started almost immediately. Audiences loved it, but local censors? Not so much. City after city demanded their own versions. Some snipped Harlow's steamiest scenes. Others slapped on alternate endings where, surprise, the bad girl gets her comeuppance. The New York State censors insisted on cutting any hint that Lil could succeed in her schemes. Meanwhile, the Catholic Legion of Decency was practically having palpitations, dubbing the film a direct attack on the sanctity of marriage. Overseas, things got even wilder. The British Board of Film Censors banned the film outright, calling it an offense to public decency. What's remarkable is that none of this killed the film's popularity. In fact, the controversy made it a must-see event. Fans lined up to catch whatever uncensored version they could, while Jean Harlow cemented her status as Hollywood's reigning bad girl. Redheaded Woman proved that censorship wasn't just about silencing movies. Sometimes it was the best publicity a film could ask for. And as for Hollywood's morals, please. They were already out the window, and Harlow had the keys. Babyface 1933. If you've ever wanted to see a movie that made censors sweat bullets and then scramble for the scissors, look no further than Babyface. Barbara Stanwyck plays Lily Powers, a woman who's had enough of being used and decides to use the system right back. With a cold stare and even colder resolve, she works her way up a skyscraper, literally, by seducing every man with a corner office. This wasn't just risque for the 1930s, it was a bomb tossed into the moral panic of the Depression era. The original cut of Babyface was practically a dare to the censors. Lily isn't punished, isn't shamed, she wins and she knows it. The dialogue was laced with innuendo, and the sexual politics were, frankly, decades ahead of their time. Enter the moral watchdogs. Church groups, social reformers, and the newly empowered Production Code Office went ballistic. They demanded sweeping changes, whole scenes cut, illusions softened, and most importantly, a new, tacked-on ending where Lily learns the error of her ways and settles for a quiet, humble life. But here's the real kicker. Babyface was already a hit before the censors could clamp down. Some theaters showed the uncut version, while others got the sanitized, moralized rewrite. Audiences traded rumors about which city had the real film, and bootleg prints circulated among collectors for decades. The legend only grew as lost reels surfaced in archives, revealing just how much had been chopped away. In the end, Babyface didn't just survive censorship, it became a symbol of everything the pre-code era stood for. Guts, wit, and the refusal to apologize for a single scandalous frame. The message was clear. Sometimes, the only thing more dangerous than a bad girl on screen is the crowd trying to silence her. The Story of Temple Drake, 1933. Here's a film that practically had censors running for cover. The Story of Temple Drake. Based on William Faulkner's notoriously dark novel Sanctuary, this movie didn't just cross the line, it torched the map altogether. Starring Miriam Hopkins as Temple, a judge's daughter who gets caught up in a whirlpool of crime and corruption, the film delivered subject matter that was as radioactive in 1933 as it would be today. From the very first screening, Temple Drake ignited outrage. The story dives headfirst into abduction, assault, and the utter collapse of Southern respectability. Critics and reformers were horrified. Church groups, especially in the American South, wasted no time denouncing the film as not just immoral, but dangerous to public decency. State censorship boards pounced, and soon entire stretches of the country, including Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, banned the movie outright. Even the notoriously lenient New York censors ordered substantial cuts before granting approval. But the damage was done. Studio execs tried to ride out the firestorm, even quietly re-editing the film to soften its most controversial edges. Some theaters received versions with entire plot points missing. Others substituted abrupt fade-outs for scenes deemed too explicit. Internationally, the film was effectively blacklisted, with British and Canadian censors declaring it unfit for civilized eyes. In some places, posters and advertisements were quietly pulled down, as if the film never existed. Yet for all the fury, Temple Drake has survived as a legend. Its reputation for going too far has given it a second life among cinephiles, and its lost footage has become the stuff of archival treasure hunts. The lesson? If you really want to scandalize America, just bring Faulkner's nightmares to life and wait for the scissors to fly. Tarzan and His Mate, 1934. If you think censorship was all about racy dialogue and bad behavior, let's talk about Tarzan and His Mate. You probably picture swinging vines and jungle yells, but MGM's 1934 sequel to Tarzan the Ape Man shocked audiences for an entirely different reason. A full-on underwater nude swimming sequence that was so daring, even today's studio execs might blush. The notorious scene features Maureen O'Sullivan's Jane swimming gracefully in her birthday suit, accompanied by Tarzan and an underwater ballet of wild abandon. American censors, already on edge as the Hays Code tightened its grip, lost their collective minds. The outcry was immediate and loud, with religious leaders, women's groups, and city censors calling the film shameless. Newspapers declared the scene a threat to public morality, and letters poured in demanding an explanation for how something so indecent ever made it to screen. MGM scrambled to respond. The film was hastily recalled from certain theaters, and new prints with the infamous footage axed were distributed nationwide. In some regions, the scene was replaced by choppily edited montages, leaving audiences confused and studios embarrassed. Even the film's international distribution hit a wall. British and Canadian censors banned the original cut and wouldn't approve the movie until the offending moments vanished. Ironically, the censorship only amplified the film's appeal. Moviegoers flocked to theaters hoping to catch an uncut screening, and Tarzan and His Mate developed a cult reputation for its forbidden footage. For decades, the lost swim scene was whispered about among film buffs, until it resurfaced in restorations, thrilling modern audiences with the same rebellious energy that once got it censored. If you ever wondered what it took to get a jungle adventure banned, just ask Jane. Island of Lost Souls, 1932. What if I told you that one of the most chilling sci-fi horror films of the 1930s didn't just spook audiences, it sent censors into an absolute panic? Enter Island of Lost Souls, the first screen adaptation of H.G. Wells's The Island of Dr. Moreau. Charles Laughton stars as the sadistic Dr. Moreau, ruling over a nightmarish island filled with his half-human, half-animal creations. The film is gothic, grotesque, and utterly relentless, and the authorities wanted it gone. Censorship started early, but the real trouble came after the film's release. The British Board of Film Censors banned it outright, calling the film absolutely unfit for exhibition. In the United States, local boards weren't much kinder. Several states and dozens of cities either pulled the movie or demanded extreme cuts. Scenes showing the transformation of humans into beasts, the infamous "Are we not men?" ritual, and suggestions of interspecies attraction had the moral guardians howling. The controversy wasn't just about violence, it was about blasphemy. Religious leaders condemned the film for playing God, accusing it of mocking creation and human dignity. Some church groups lobbied theater chains to drop the film entirely, and in the South, screenings were canceled with little warning. Paramount, caught off guard, tried reissuing censored versions, but the film's reputation stuck. Internationally, bans stacked up from Australia to Sweden. Island of Lost Souls was officially too disturbing for public consumption. Despite or because of all this, the movie became legendary, surviving in bootleg prints and whispered recommendation. Today, it's hailed as a horror masterpiece and a monument to how censorship often has the opposite effect. The harder you try to suppress a nightmare, the more people want to see it for themselves. Search for Beauty, 1934. If you think censorship was reserved for films with criminal masterminds and sultry femme fatales, Search for Beauty is here to prove you wrong. This one is less a crime drama and more a full-throttle parade of youthful exuberance in the name of physical culture, which, in 1934, was code for a whole lot of barely disguised titillation. Paramount pitched it as a wholesome health and exercise movie, but with Olympic athletes in minimal attire and suggestive innuendo baked into every scene. The censors weren't fooled for a second. Here's how the mayhem played out. The film launched with a publicity blitz, casting the winners of a nationwide beauty contest in starring roles. American audiences swarmed in, but it didn't take long for church groups, moral watchdogs, and local censors to get whiplash. They complained the film promoted immorality, immodesty, and licentiousness, all words that basically translate to, "We saw too much skin for comfort." As the letters poured in, state and city censorship boards demanded that Paramount make cuts to dialogue and several long lingering shots of athletic bodies in motion. It didn't stop there. In Australia, the censors declared the film unfit for public exhibition, and in the UK, the British Board of Film Censors slashed out entire scenes and threatened a ban. Even after heavy edits, some American states yanked it from theaters, and Paramount had to release several different versions, each with fewer and fewer offensive frames. The irony? For all the moral panic, Search for Beauty was a frothy, harmless celebration of youth. But by trying to show off the human form as something to be proud of, the film found itself steamrolled by America's deep-seated anxieties about bodies, pleasure, and a culture in crisis. If you want a film that got censored just for being fun, this is it. Call Her Savage, 1932. There are pre-code films that ruffled feathers, and then there's Call Her Savage, the comeback vehicle for silent-era icon Clara Bow. If Babyface made censors sweat, this one left them gasping for air. Bow plays NASA Springer, a woman whose turbulent life unfolds in a series of wild, reckless adventures, from drunken brawls and scandalous affairs to moments of hinted-at same-sex attraction and taboo family secrets. By 1932 standards, this was dynamite. The trouble began the second the film hit screens. Reviewers and church groups pounced, decrying its immoral influence and degrading content. Several city censorship boards, including Chicago's infamously strict panel, demanded cuts before the film could play. Key scenes hinting at lesbian romance were ordered removed, or so heavily trimmed that their context became almost nonsensical. In Boston, the authorities went further, yanking the entire film from circulation after only a few showings. What made Call Her Savage a lightning rod wasn't just its content, but its tone. Raw, unrepentant, and shockingly modern. Beau's character doesn't just weather adversity, she storms through it, refusing to be broken or domesticated. For 1932, this was more than radical. It was borderline heresy. Even after being sliced and diced for re-release, the film faced continued pushback from moral crusaders and even some studio executives. And yet, all the drama only increased public interest. Audiences flocked to see what all the fuss was about, and Clara Bow, for a moment, reclaimed her throne as Hollywood's queen of scandal. In the end, the censors may have won a few battles, but Call Her Savage proved you can't put the wildest stories or the wildest women back in the box. Scarface, 1932. Forget everything you know about gangster movies. Scarface is the one that changed the game and nearly burned down the house. Produced by Howard Hughes and directed by Howard Hawks, this ultra-violent, hyper-stylized crime saga made Tony Camonte, the original Scarface, a household name and set a new bar for cinematic carnage, but not everyone was cheering. From day one, the film was hounded by authorities for glorifying crime and disrespecting the law. The initial cut featured machine gun shootouts, brutal murders, and a level of nihilism that made the earlier Little Caesar look like a church picnic. Local censors and politicians weren't having it. Chicago, America's crime capital at the time, flat out refused to screen the film, citing its dangerous influence. Other cities demanded a laundry list of edits, from toning down the violence to completely rewriting the ending. So Hughes and Hawks fought back, recutting and reshooting multiple endings. In one, Tony gets killed in a blaze of bullets, classic gangster's fate. In another, he surrenders to the police, is tried and hanged, a forced morality tale tacked on for the censors' benefit. Some regions even made the studio add a preachy opening crawl denouncing organized crime. No two audiences saw exactly the same movie. Did the censorship kill the film? Not even close. If anything, Scarface became more infamous, drawing packed houses eager to see what the fuss was about. Its legend only grew as censored reels circulated underground, and critics hailed it as the wildest, most honest crime story Hollywood had ever dared to tell. The message was clear. You can try to clean up the streets, but Hollywood's outlaws will always find their way back into the spotlight. The Sign of the Cross, 1932. When it comes to films that made censors lose their minds, Cecil B. DeMille's The Sign of the Cross is a gladiator in the arena of outrage. This lavish Roman epic wasn't just a spectacle, it was a brazen parade of flesh, violence, and forbidden thrills, with a script practically begging the censors to do their worst. Claudette Colbert's infamous milk bath scene is legendary for a reason. It pushed visual boundaries in a way that had religious groups and city officials howling for edits before the opening credits even finished rolling. The uproar wasn't limited to just one country. In America, state and city censorship boards took turns hacking away at DeMille's epic. Some cut the milk bath, others snipped scenes of gladiators facing off against half-naked prisoners, and almost everyone agreed. The Christian thrown to the lions set pieces were too graphic for public consumption. The Catholic Legion of Decency labeled the film morally offensive, prompting boycotts and angry sermons. Overseas, things got even messier. The British Board of Film Censors initially refused a certificate, and French censors deleted entire subplots. But DeMille, always the showman, knew controversy sold tickets. He fought back, sometimes restoring scenes for select markets and quietly encouraging audiences to seek out the uncut versions. This only increased the movie's mystique. The scandal cemented The Sign of the Cross as the must-see movie for audiences hungry for taboo spectacle and for censors. It was an exhausting game of whack-a-mole. The moral? No amount of scissors could hide Hollywood's taste for the outrageous, not when DeMille was at the helm. 3 on a Match 1932. Who says melodrama can't cause a moral panic? 3 on a Match proved otherwise. Released at the height of the Great Depression, this Warner Brothers' shocker featured Ann Dvorak, Bette Davis, and Joan Blondell in a story that moves at breakneck speed. Booze, divorce, abduction, drug addiction, and a finale that is still jaw-dropping nearly a century later. In a decade of taboo busting, this film threw the kitchen sink at the audience, and censors raced to keep up. What really rattled officials was the storyline involving Dvorak's character, who spirals into addiction and ultimately endangers her own child. Drug use on screen? That was enough for cities like Chicago and Boston to demand the entire subplot be cut, stripping the movie of its most shocking moments. In some regions, the ending, already grim, was made even more abrupt, omitting crucial scenes that hinted at the cycle of abuse and neglect. Even advertisements had to be reworked. Posters in several cities blacked out the title and taglines to avoid scandal. The controversy didn't stop at U.S. borders. Overseas, British and Canadian censors made heavy edits, while some theaters refused to show the movie at all. Ironically, the notoriety made 3 on a Match a sensation. Fans traded rumors about which prints were the real ones, and critics called it both morally poisonous and a daring slice of real life. For Hollywood, it was a lesson in just how far a movie could go and how quickly the censors would follow. She done him wrong, 1933. Mae West was never one to tiptoe around controversy, and She Done Him Wrong proved she didn't have to. Set in a rowdy 1890s New York saloon, West's role as Lady Lou is the very definition of unapologetic. She flirts, schemes, and tosses one-liners like grenades, with lines like, "Why don't you come up sometime and see me?" West single-handedly made censors' blood pressure spike and ticket sales soar. But the backlash came fast, and in true West fashion, she used it to her advantage. Major U.S. cities took turns carving up the movie. Boston and Atlanta led the charge, pulling the film entirely from theaters after just a handful of showings, while other regions insisted on trimming any hint of risque dialogue or suggestive choreography. The Catholic Legion of Decency went on the warpath. denouncing West and her script as corrupting American womanhood. Internationally, things weren't much better. The British Board of Film Censors refused approval until after heavy edits, and in Australia, officials simply declared it unfit for public viewing. Mae West was unbothered. She quipped to the press that censorship was just good advertising, and she wasn't wrong. Audiences packed screenings wherever they could, eager to see what all the fuss was about. She'd done him wrong, proved that when you mix star power with a little controversy, not even a squadron of censors can keep audiences away. In Hollywood, sometimes being banned is the best badge of honor. Mandandalay, 1934. Mandalay doesn't get mentioned as often as the more notorious pre-code shockers, but it left censors just as frazzled. This Warner Brothers drama stars Kay Francis as Tanya, a woman who's forced into the role of a nightclub hostess in Rangoon, a code word for prostitution that's about as subtle as a slap to the face. The film never flinches from its heroine's moral struggles or from painting the seedy underbelly of colonial nightlife in all its sweaty, desperate glory. When Mandalay hit screens, the complaints started rolling in almost instantly. Religious groups and local censorship boards objected not just to the suggestive costumes and smoky club scenes, but also to the unvarnished treatment of suicide and addiction. In several states, including Kansas and Ohio, censors cut entire sequences, blurring Tanya's downfall until it was nearly impossible to follow her story. In Massachusetts and the UK, authorities demanded even more severe edits before letting the film unspool. The film's marketing, emphasizing its daring look at the real East, only stirred the pot. Studio heads scrambled to distribute heavily edited versions in conservative regions, while rumors of racier uncut reels drew adventurous moviegoers in droves. For every scene that survived, at least one landed on the cutting room floor. The result? Mandalay is remembered today as much for the fragments that vanished as for the film itself, a puzzle box of a movie, its original edge dulled but never fully erased by the relentless hands of the censors. Wild Boys of the Road, 1933. If you ever want to see just how much the pre-code era could needle authority, look no further than William Wellman's Wild Boys of the Road. Released at the pit of the Great Depression, this gritty, unflinching drama follows a group of teenagers thrown onto the rails, forced into a life of train-hopping, begging, and surviving any way they can. It was a howl of protest, a movie that refused to sugarcoat poverty, police brutality, or the country's sense of desperation. Censors didn't care for any of it. Social reformers accused the film of promoting lawlessness and corrupting the youth. Several state and city boards, including New York and Pennsylvania, demanded cuts to scenes depicting violence by authorities, unsupervised teens living rough, and moments that hinted at prostitution. In the South and Midwest, entire plot lines vanished, and the runtime shrank as the most disturbing moments were erased. Even after heavy editing, some cities pulled the film from circulation altogether, nervous about its perceived anti-American message. Ironically, all this controversy fueled interest, and Wild Boys of the Road became a must-see for anyone craving a dose of unfiltered reality in their cinema. Today, it's revered as a rare glimpse at the raw truth of the 1930s, a film that risked everything for honesty, only to find itself chopped and changed by those terrified of its power. Employees' Entrance, 1933. Few films pushed workplace drama to such dangerous heights as Employees' Entrance. This hard-hitting pre-code gem stars Warren William as Kurt Anderson, a ruthless department store manager whose abuse of power and of his employees makes modern HR departments look like summer camps. Loretta Young's character, at the center of Anderson's unwanted advances, gave audiences a glimpse of predatory behavior in the workplace that was both shocking and, to many, all too real. Censorship hit almost immediately after release. Scenes depicting Anderson's manipulation, emotional abuse, and implied sexual assault triggered outrage from city and state boards. Chicago and Detroit demanded entire conversations be muted or cut. In Boston, censors snipped out so much that the plot barely held together, while in the South, screenings were canceled outright after protests from women's groups and churches. Even international censors got in on the act. The film was banned in the UK until severe edits were made, and Canadian authorities followed suit. But the cuts couldn't kill the film's reputation. Audiences, especially women, flocked to see the unflinching drama, and employees' entrance became a talking point for workplace rights long before such discussions were common. The censors may have tried to protect the public, but in the end, they only made the film's message ring louder. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing in a department store isn't a price tag, but the man signing the paychecks. So, what does it say about Hollywood when the stories too scandalous to survive are the ones we remember best? For every reel censored and every scene lost, audiences demanded more, and history turned these films into legends. Which of these censored classics do you wish you could see uncut? Drop your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more untamed Hollywood history, and share this with your fellow film buffs. Remember, sometimes the sharpest cut is the one that makes a legend.